Welcome back to our Steven. Used a propane grill yesterday, and I just had to talk like Hank Hill the rest of the day. And today, from a manager getting the shortest reports that they could have asked for, to another person being told to do something that literally defies physics, we've got some great malicious compliance stories, all starting with a post titled, "My girlfriend spent 2 years telling me I say yes too much, and then asked me to dog sit for a week." This requires a tiny bit of context. I am, by nature, someone who agrees to things. Not because I'm a pushover exactly, more that I just find it easier to say yes and adjust than to push back and deal with the fallout. My girlfriend Claire found this genuinely frustrating. For roughly 2 years, she made it her personal mission to get me to say no more often. You're allowed to have preferences. Stop agreeing with things you don't actually want. Just say no sometimes, it costs you nothing. She meant it kindly. She brought it up maybe once a month, sometimes more. She even framed it as personal growth, said it was something she admired in people who could do it cleanly without guilt. She was so consistent about this that it started to actually rewire something in me. I began to notice, then question, then occasionally decline things. Small things at first. I said no to a friend who wanted to borrow my charger for 3 days. I told my cousins I couldn't make it to his thing. It felt strange, but Claire was genuinely proud every time I reported back. Then, in late February, her friend needed someone to watch her dog for 8 days while she visited family. Claire asked me if I could do it, and I want to be clear that I thought about it for a real amount of time. I considered the dog, the 8 days, the fact that I don't particularly enjoy dogs in my space for extended periods, and the 2 years of dedicated coaching I had received on this exact type of moment. Then I said no, calmly, without guilt, no long explanation, just, I don't think that works for me. There was a pause. Claire stared at me. I watched her go through several expressions in about 4 seconds. She started to say something, stopped, and then said, "That's not what I meant." And I said very gently that I understood, but she had been a really excellent teacher, and I wanted her to know the lessons had stuck. The dog went to a kennel. Claire has not brought up the saying no thing since February. So this might just about be the most dated reference I could make, but OP kind of reminds me of Chucky Finster. All they know at this point is how to say no. In the comments, a user named Chaz Kwangshi wrote, "This isn't even being malicious to be fair. I don't want to is a perfectly valid reason, and dog sitting for 8 days is a seriously huge ask. This is a perfect example of a scenario you should be okay with saying no to. It would be malicious if you only said no to spite your girlfriend." The OP replied, "That was my thing too. I didn't say no to punish her. I said no because 8 days with a dog in my apartment sounded miserable." Another user named Freak My Life wrote, "I'm so proud of you, OP. I want to kiss you as a reward, but I'm gonna be sad if you say no." The OP replied, "This feels like a trap specifically designed for my growth journey." And speaking of saying no, would you like to hit those like and subscribe buttons down below? Go ahead, let it out. I promise I can take the rejection. Our next story is, help the customer? Absolutely. Someone's spouse has cancer. This person has taken all the right steps. They've contacted all the right doctors, set up all the right appointments, all their finances are squared away. They even have health insurance for times like this. There's just one problem. Their spouse's date of birth is incorrect on their health insurance policy. This is causing issues with doctor visits and making it difficult to obtain life-saving medication. They're crying themselves to sleep at night. They don't know if their lifelong partner is going to be alive next month. They're just hoping that someone, somewhere can help provide the necessary treatment. They're asking for a miracle. However, as their insurance carrier, we are not allowed to make any changes to their policy. Why not? First, some background. I've been working in the soul-crushing industry of health insurance for a few years. It's as terrible as everyone makes it out to be. Everything is very compartmentalized. No one wants to take ownership and actually help people. One big problem is that our department only has employer-sponsored insurance. This means that your employer allows you to choose from different carriers, such as Aetna, Blue Cross, or Cigna. After reviewing your options, you tell them, "I want Aetna." Now, your employer deducts money from your paycheck and automatically manages your Aetna account for you. Perfect, you might think. That stuff is too complicated anyway. I'm better off letting the professionals handle the paperwork for me. Indeed, it certainly feels like a load off, but there's also an issue with that. A lot of people don't care about you, and they don't care if you've been in agonizing pain for months or even years. They just know when it's their turn to take your call, there's another department they'll transfer you to. Because they don't want to speak with you anymore. They don't want to hear you cry or see that their complacency is causing people so much pain. There's also another issue. If an employer has full permission to change your policy, then that limits my ability to make any changes for you. Imagine calling up your insurance and us saying, "I know that you have coverage with us, but I can't switch you to a family plan. You have to call your HR for that." I'm sure it sounds even dumber to the customer than it does to me. Can the employer and the insurance not simply talk to each other? Or better yet, maybe you've left your job for a new one. Maybe you've just enrolled into college. You need a letter showing that your old insurance is no longer active. You can't even get new insurance until you have that letter. Sorry, but our records show you're still active. We can't send a termination letter until the employer tells us. Pure insanity. Here's where it gets even crazier. There's one employer we deal with who has taken full control of member enrollment. We are not allowed to touch anything. Change of address? Sorry, call HR. In the meantime, we'll keep sending your protected health information to your old address. Spouse's date of birth is wrong, and you can't pick up medicine at the pharmacy? Tough luck. That one can take months to sort out. We can't change the information even if we want to. It completely locks us out of the database. The most difficult part is that this employer is notorious for delaying service, having extremely long hold times, and stonewalling its employees. Nothing we can do, they'll say. You have to call your health insurance because everything looks good on our end. This is a bald-faced lie or just sheer incompetence on their end because the employer has to send us the right information. But instead, they're bouncing their member around just to avoid a few extra minutes of paperwork. Things got so bad and members were getting so mistreated, we were instructed to start escalating our calls so that members wouldn't have to be the middleman between our enrollment department and their employer. But like I said, things are very compartmentalized, even on my end. People don't want to take accountability. My higher-up started saying, "Stop sending cases for us to work. You, the lowly service agent, must first contact the employer before we do." Cue malicious compliance. You want me to spend an hour listening to hold music instead of getting cussed out by people? Say no more, my friend. Customers were ecstatic when I told them that I would be happy to call their employer for them. It's a bit of a hold time, but you don't have to worry about that. I'll call them, and I'll give them all the instructions they need to get this corrected. You don't have to worry about anything. We'll have this sorted out by next week. Some customers would still voice their concerns. It's impossible to get an agent from my employer on the line. Their system tells you to call back later. I've been trying all afternoon. That's right. It would take hours just to dial their employer, followed by hours of holding, followed by months of delay. How could anyone with a conscience allow that type of stress to continue? Not to worry, I told them. I have an automated dialer that allows me to make a bunch of calls at once. I'll get into their queue within 5 minutes. I did this for a few months. I was able to successfully sort out hundreds of enrollment issues with this particular employer. My turnaround time for each member was only a couple of days. Normally, it would have taken months or even years, but the process was completely streamlined because I knew what to ask for, how to ask for it, and where to forward documentation. Members can't be expected to know these things, but when the member called us, we were able to get it taken care of. Essentially, I made it my mission to call this employer every waking moment. Normally, they needed verbal permission from the member to speak with me, but I got so familiar with their call flow that I figured out the exact phrasing that would get documentation sent over without involving the member. Agents started recognizing me on a first-name basis. When I called in, they knew they couldn't drag their feet anymore. "Oh, it's this guy again? All right, fine, here's your paperwork." Their managers started putting in special notes that documentation could be shared. Members would call in very distressed about their enrollment situation, and I would explain that my new, unofficial job title was calling this employer. We got birth dates changed, we got medications filled, we got policy letters sent. For a good chunk of time, people were getting taken care of. The fallout was just as wild. Rather than being congratulated for a job well done, or at the very least, having people bow down at my feet the moment I walked into the office, the tone was much more idiotic. Instead, the higher-ups realized that my successful work was creating more work for them, because now they had to actually help people and process the right paperwork. We don't want you calling this company anymore. That's not the right move. You have to stop immediately. Sorry, boss. I forgot I'm just a paper pusher. What do you want me to say when a member's spouse is needing chemo drugs and dying of cancer because we can't change their date of birth? Tell them to call their HR. You can transfer them in, but you can't dial a bunch of times, and you can't speak to an agent for them. Got it. So, I have to throw them into the deep end. And here I thought I was doing something useful for people. My bad. It won't happen again. Spoiler, it did happen again, and my higher-ups got really mad. Luckily, it was a manager who instructed me to call the employer. I even asked, "Are you sure I'm allowed to do this?" They said yes, and sent me that instruction in writing. Because of this, I didn't get in trouble for it. And once again, for a short time, people were able to get coverage with zero hiccups. Unfortunately, my company was foaming at the mouth and put a dead stop to it. Emails were sent to every agent in our company stating that no one was allowed to contact this employer under any circumstances. New call scripting was created specifically for this employer. If someone has an enrollment issue, tell them that this employer is not accepting new calls at this time. Oh hey, now we're the ones telling the bald-faced lies. No, that employer never shut down their phone lines. It just takes a while to get through. But some corporate idiot thought it would be better for our metrics if we started lying to our members. Also, tell them that we're here for them every step of the way during this tough time. Cheap words that ended up deflating good results. If someone ever utters the words, "I'm here for you every step of the way," while avoiding all responsibility, you know they want nothing to do with you. They only like results when it means zero extra work for them. My question is it truly they only like results when it means zero extra work for them? Or does it mean they only like results when it means that these people can't actually make claims, but still have money withheld from their paychecks and sent over to the insurance company? Of course they have a vested interest in trying to maintain this roadblock. They want to try to intentionally make sure that that lady that needs chemo can't get access to it, so they don't have to foot the bill, but they'll still gladly take their chunk out of her paycheck. I doubt it was ever about paperwork. In the comments, a user named OK Refrigerator wrote, "A great insight in how insurance companies work. How do you manage to work there day in, day out? It sounds awful." The OP replied, "That's a really good question. I honestly feel like I'm almost out the door at this point. Everything I described in this post basically ended it for me. How could I possibly go from making a difference to being told, 'Enough of that, start lying to people'? They have really good benefits and bonuses, but people's lives are more important than that." Our next story is boot camp orders. Many years ago, when I was in Navy boot camp, one of the division leaders decided that because I was the heaviest member of the group, I was going to get special attention. He told me in front of everyone, "Every time you see my smiling face, I want you to drop and give me 20 push-ups." I'm a natural-born smart butt, so malicious compliance was definitely in my wheelhouse. The next day, he walked out, and I stood still at attention like everyone else. He walked up to me and asked if I remembered what he told me. I told him I did, and repeated it back to him. "Then why aren't you doing push-ups?" I said, "You're not smiling." He broke a smile, and I immediately dropped and did the push-ups. Am I wrong in saying that I think OP actually won some points with them? I mean, they got them to crack a smile, and then to OP's credit, they did drop down and give the push-ups when they finally had that smiling face on. If there was ever a time for an instructor or a leader to see something and go, "You know what? I respect it. They were honest, and they were kind of endearing, I guess." I think that would be one. In the comments, a user named Lapsteel Guitar wrote, "Brilliant. What would he have done if you had dropped before he smiled? Would he have smoked you for that? The OP replied, he underestimated how deeply rooted my smart butt instincts are. Our next story is, follow dress code, eh? I'm sure I've posted this in Tales from Retail at some point ages ago, but I figure it hits the definition of malicious compliance loosely enough, so why not share again? Eons ago, I worked at Best Buy. It was my third retail job, all tech adjacent or directly related, so I was very comfortable there. I was working in the cell phone/mobile department, and after a year or two, I had quickly established that I had experience selling and troubleshooting phones and carrier issues. Eventually, I had trained all of my coworkers and my assistant manager on the area. Well, as with retail, managers come and go, and the assistant manager I trained left only to be replaced with my nemesis, Emily. Now, for context, I live in a city renowned for being utterly informal and lax. That culture went with the jobs too. I wore my blue polo, I wore my black pants. However, I rather enjoyed whimsical belts, typically featuring Star Wars, Spider-Man, and Deadpool, and I owned a nice comfy pair of work boots. Emily did not like me. To be fair, I did strut around like I knew everything in the department, because I did. The first day she was assistant managing me, she attempted to inject herself into a transaction I was completing to correct me about a carrier issue that I was navigating. Her correction was less than accurate, and in my typical friendly fashion, I clarified, I know, but I find that if I contact our rep, they can resolve this pretty quickly. She really did not like that, and from that point on, she took umbrage with my work clothes. Before I knew it, I had gotten a warning and then a write-up for belts and shoes I'd been wearing for over a year at work, issue-free. I complained as such, and she referred me to the work dress code. You all know how this song and dance goes. I studied the dress code meticulously. Much to my chagrin, she was right. The dress code did state that plain black belts and black shoes were typically required. Had I stopped reading there, I'd have been beaten. But the dress code did have one additional clause. The GM gets final say on all dress code disputes. Irritated that I seemed to be the only person nitpicked so hard about the dress code, I went to my, and assistant manager's, direct manager, Mark. Mark did not spontaneously begin to care about my belt or shoes despite over a year of apathy. I informed Emily. She did not care. So I went to the GM, Paul. Paul, much to my surprise, also did not spontaneously decide that the store's very well-being hinged on my purchasing another belt. I informed Emily. She did not care. However, by this point, she was definitely getting more irritated with me and would dress me down every time I came in with the wrong belt, which was daily. Eventually, holiday season started rolling around, and our store was going to be the Black Friday demo store for our region. That meant that various Best Buy bigwigs, most of whom likely hadn't mingled with the peasantry for years, were coming by for a walkthrough. The day of the walkthrough came, and I roll into my spot at Mobile sporting the same dang Spider-Man belt I'd been wearing for over a year. Emily began her daily lecture about it. Unfortunately for her, I was pretty well out of freaks to give. Mid-lecture, I spied a bunch of people who were slightly overdressed for Best Buy wandering around with a GM. We are typically a business formal kind of Best Buy. For those confused, this is a joke I recall that our GM had been sweating about the VP of Best Buy showing up. So I rolled up to the most important looking person in the group, around whom the rest were orbiting, and introduced myself. I said, "Hiya, I'm OP." The VP replied, "Hello, I'm Vice President of Best Buy." I replied, "I figured, sorry, but I was hoping you could answer a quick question for me." They respond, "Sure." I say, "I've had some disagreements with someone here about dress code. Do you find this belt overly offensive?" The VP replied, "I don't really care about your belt." I responded, "Fantastic. Thank you. Have a wonderful visit." I strolled back over to the mobile department to find Emily, slack-jawed, glaring at me. I informed her that the VP of Best Buy was not offended by my belt. I got a stern talking to about not embarrassing the store in front of fancy high-up people, but after that, she stopped nagging me about my belt and boots. Eventually, she moved to a different store, and I got the heck out of retail. I think what I admire most about OP is their sheer confidence, because there's no way that you would catch me walking up to the VP of the company I work for, gesturing to my belt of all places, and being like, "Does this offend you?" Not gonna lie, I feel like if I went and did that, next thing I know, I'm sitting with HR dealing with a harassment case. Sitting there like, I just wanted to know if my belt offended them. In the comments, a user named JT Farabee wrote, "As a former Best Buy employee, this is excellent. Especially having worked at the store level, but having contact with corporate directors and VPs, this perfectly embodies the pettiness of local supervision, contrasting the executive level desire for personable and profitable employees." Our next story is first time following rules. One of my first jobs at 14 was in a leather shop. We turned to deer hide into leather. It was actually physically demanding and unhealthy, I'm sure, as we dipped the hides in lye before working them in some old large wood buildings. My third day on the job, a light caught fire, and I went out to notify my boss. I said, "Hey sir," and he told me, "Not right now." I pleaded and said, "But you should really hear." He cut me off and said, "Not another word, back to work or you're fired." I wanted to tell him, and that's when it clicked. I went back to work. I watched the far wall engulf in flames. I was watching my exit, debating on leaving soon, and that's when he came in rushing to the smoke, yelled at me for still working, and said, "Get outside." I replied that he told me to get back to work. As I walked out, fire trucks were already coming in, and I hopped a bus home. Okay, so I think this is one of the malicious compliance stories where OP really shouldn't have maliciously complied. In fact, I feel like OP, in an order of operations reasoning, completely failed here. They should not have come in like, excuse me, hey, sir. Instead, they should have bust in there screaming their head off about a fire. In the comments, a user named Large Client wrote, "Your first words should not be, hey, sir. The only word you needed was fire." The OP of the post replied, "I can definitely agree, but I was 14. The guy was a complete jerk, and probably why I was nervous to speak to him." A user named Harry Horrocks asked, "What was the fallout?" The OP replied, "Fire was put out, and he sent people back to work, but I had already left." Our next story is, my manager told me to write shorter reports, so I did. For context, I work in logistics coordination. Every week, I submit a report summarizing what happened with our shipments, delays, carrier issues, that kind of thing. My reports were usually around a page, maybe a page and a half. Detailed, clear, everything you needed to know. 3 weeks into my new job, my manager pulled me aside and said, and I quote, "Your reports are good, but they're too long. Cut out the fluff. Nobody has time to read all that." Okay, fine. No fluff. The next week, I submitted this. Week 34, all shipments delivered, 2 delays resolved, 1 carrier changed, no outstanding issues. That's it. That was the report. Every single thing in it was accurate. Nothing was missing in terms of facts. Were there nuances? Sure. Did the delayed shipments involve a fairly heated call with a vendor that probably needed documenting? Technically, yes. But he said no fluff, and vendor drama felt like fluff to me. He responded within 4 minutes, asking me to elaborate a little, so I added the word successfully before resolved. Week 34, all shipments delivered, 2 delays successfully resolved, 1 carrier changed, no outstanding issues. He came to my desk in person to discuss the report. We talked for 20 minutes. I took notes. The notes were longer than any report I had ever written. I now submit the same 1-page reports as before. He hasn't mentioned the length since. I elaborated on nothing else, and he did not ask me to. In a way, I feel like I kind of get where the manager is coming from. When you have to look at this one-page document every single day, you probably get a little bored of the routine, and you get a little bored of the fact that sometimes you read a whole bunch of extra stuff that doesn't seem necessary. Maybe the manager on that day that they made the request was having an especially bad day or something. They just go, "Come on, OP, cut out the fluff already." But as it's revealed, it's likely more of an emotional request than an actually practical one. In the comments, a user named Ogre Green Team wrote, "I once had a manager tell me to save time and write shorter emails. I told her to show me where there's any fluff in my emails. I'm an electronic engineer. I'll show her what'll get broken if I leave out anything she suggests." So later, when she drafted my performance review to say I don't tolerate fools, I asked her to give me an example of one. Our next story is tasked with defying the laws of physics. This happened years ago. I was working in engineering and fabrication, and my CEO was a classic micromanager who was also a salesman. To him, the customer is always right, even when the customer has no idea what they're talking about. We had a project where a customer requested a custom-built sheet metal rack to hold several heavy bottles. Their sketch showed a V-shaped piece to cradle the bottles. But these bottles were heavy, and a V-shape, especially out of thin sheet metal, would inevitably start to deform under load due to the force distribution. I proposed an L-shaped design instead. It wasn't as aesthetic, but it would distribute the weight better, resist bending, and still securely hold the bottles. The customer was fine with this once I explained the mechanics. But then my CEO jumps in. "No, we're going with the customer's original idea. Make it V-shaped. They wanted a V, they get a V. I don't want to explain why we changed it." He was actually visibly anxious that I wasn't planning on giving the customer their exact design. I pushed back, explained the issue again, and reminded him the customer already accepted the L shape, but he doubled down. "Follow the original request exactly." So I did. I built the V-shaped piece, precisely as requested, installed it, placed the bottles on it. Within 24 hours, the V started to deform. Sheet metal bowed outward, and the whole structure looked like it was wilting under pressure. The customer called us and said, "Yeah, maybe your engineer had the right idea." Guess who had to fix it? Me. Guess what design we went with the second time? My original L-shaped version. I'm wondering how big this company was to have a CEO that was so involved with this project, but also had no idea how any of this worked, and had no willingness to believe and listen to the engineer that said, "The laws of physics will not allow this design to work." Boss, unless you've got unobtainium, this design literally will not work. It just physically can't. In the comments, a user named Tremenda Karusha wrote, "I mean, it's wild that an engineer had to convince their boss of basic physics. Did the CEO think the bottles would just magically stick to the V? And then the boss still went ahead with it? Must have been some ego trip there." Another user named Go Climb a Rock replied, "Yes, that's quite common. The Dunning-Kruger effect becomes more prevalent the higher up the corporate ladder one travels." Our next story is, you're only allowed to listen to one song. This is a more lighthearted malicious compliance, but I was thinking about it earlier and thought I'd share. When I was a kid, my dad used to torture my ears on the drive to school with his terrible music. We came to an agreement that I was allowed to listen to one song per journey, no matter the genre or what my dad thought of it. For a couple of weeks, I got to enjoy a few minutes of bliss every day, but there had to be a way I could make it last longer. That's when I discovered a band called NoFX. Most of their songs are a couple of minutes long, except for one. A song called The Decline that's roughly 18 minutes long. I was doing my best to hide my smile when I put it on. It took about 6 minutes before, "How long is this dang song?" When I said 18 minutes, he immediately turned it off and said, "I'm not listening to that crap for that long." I had my song access revoked for about a month. When I was eventually allowed one song again, it was on a case-by-case basis, and definitely not anything longer than 6 minutes. It was kind of worth it just to see my dad's reaction to an 18-minute punk song. Edit, I've got some longer songs to check out when I get home. In the comments, one user wrote, define awful music. The OP replied, he would play Elvis and Johnny Cash sometimes, which I didn't mind. But it was other similar sounding, but somehow nowhere near as good artists from around that time. I couldn't name any, but American country singers from the late 50s, 60s that just carried a very boring vibe. But with that being said, that's all the time we have for today. Now, if you want to hear some more awesome malicious compliance stories, why not check out another video I did on the left of the screen right now? Or if you missed my latest video, you can check that out on the right. That said, I'll see you all next time with some more stories.